Hi, it's Mrs. Whynott, and we're going to read the chapter called the BFG. I'm on page 25. I'm here in my living room on my favorite spot on the couch with my favorite gray blanket, and Olive's here too. She's going to read with us. And grab your book, and here we go. The giant picked up the trembling Sophie with one hand and carried her across the cave and put her on the table. Now he's really going to eat me, Sophie thought. The giant sat down and stared hard at Sophie. He had truly enormous ears. Each one was as big as a wheel of a truck, and he seemed to be able to move them inwards and outwards from his head as he wished. "I is hungry," the giant boomed. He grinned, showing his massive square teeth. The teeth were very white and very square. They sat in his mouth like huge slices of white bread. "Please don't eat me," Sophie stammered. The giant let out a bellow of laughter. "Just because I's a giant, you think I's a man-gobbling cannibal?" he shouted. "You is about right. Giants is all cannibal and murderful, and they does gobble up human beings. We's in giant country now. Giants is everywhere around. Out there, us has to be famous bone-crunching giant. Bone-crunching giant crunches up 2 whoopsie-whiffling human beings for supper every night. Noise is ear-bursting. Noise of crunching bones goes crackety-crack for miles around." "Ouch," Sophie said. "Bone-crunching giant only gobbles human beings from Turkey," the giant said. "Every night Bone Cruncher is galloping off to Turkey to gobble up Turks." Sophie's sense of patriotism was suddenly so bruised by this remark that she became quite angry. "Why Turks?" she blurted out. "What's wrong with the English?" "Bone Crunching Giant says Turks is tasting ever so much juicier and much more scrumdiddlyumptious. Bone Cruncher says Turkish human beings have a glamourly flavor. He says Turks from Turkey is tasting of turkey." "I suppose they would," Sophie said. "Of course they would," the giant shouted. "Every human being is diddly and different. Some is scrumptiddlyumptious. Some is ucky slush. Greek is all full of ucky slush. No giant is eating Greeks ever." "Why not?" Sophie asked. "Greeks from Greece is all tasting greasy," the giant said. "I imagine that's possible too," Sophie said. She was wondering with a bit of tremble what all this talking about eating people was leading up to. Whatever happened, she thought, she must simply play along with this peculiar giant and smile at all of his jokes. But were they jokes? Perhaps the great brute was just working up an appetite by talking about food. "As I'm saying," the giant went on, "all human beings is having different flavors. Human beings from Panama is tasting very strong of hats." "Why hats?" Sophie said. "You're not very clever," the giant said, moving his great ears in and out. "I thought all human beings is full of brains, but your head is emptier than a bondungle." "Do you like vegetables?" Sophie asked. She was hoping to steer... Hold on a minute. There's the picture. She was hoping to steer the conversation slightly less dangerous toward a slightly less dangerous kind of food. "You's trying to change the subject," the giant said sternly. "We's having an interesting babblement about the taste of human being. The human being is not a vegetable." "Oh, but the bean is a vegetable," Sophie said. "Not the human being," the giant said. "The human being has 2 legs, and a vegetable has no legs at all." Sophie didn't argue anymore. The last thing she wanted to do was make the giant cross. "The human being," the giant went on, "is coming in dillions of different flavors. For instance, human beings from Wales is tasting very whooshery of fish. There's something very fishy about Wales." "You mean Wales," Sophie said. Whales is something quite different. Whales is whales, the giant said. Don't gobble funk around with the words. I'll give you another example. Human beings from Jersey has the most disgustable woolly tickle on your tongue, the giant said. Human beings from Jersey is tasting of cardigans. This is what I'm wearing, a cardigan. You mean jerseys, Sophie said. Once again, you are gobble funking, the giant shouted. Don't do it. This is serious, and snitching subjects is... May I continue? Please do, Sophie said. Danes from Denmark is tasting very much of dogs, the giant went on. Of course, Sophie said. They taste a Great Danes. Wrong, said the giant, slapping his thigh. Danes from Denmark is tasting doggy because they're tasting of Labradors. Then what do the people of Labrador taste of? Sophie asked. Danes, the giant cried triumphantly. Great Danes! Aren't you getting a bit mixed up? Sophie asked. I's a very mixed up giant, the giant said, but I does do my best. And I is not nearly as mixed up as the other giants. I know one who gallops all the way to Wellington for his supper. Wellington, Sophie said. Where is Wellington? Your head is full of squashed flies, the giant said. Wellington's in New Zealand. The human beings in Wellington has an especially scrumptiddly-yumptious taste. So says the welly-eating giant. What do the Wellington taste of? Sophie asked. Poots, the giant said. Oh, of course, Sophie said. I should have known. Sophie decided that this conversation had now gone on long enough. If she was going to be eaten, she'd rather get it over with and done with right away than kept hanging around any more. What sort of human beings do you eat? She asked, trembling. Me, shouted the giant, his mighty voice making the glass jars rattle on the shelves. Me gobbling up human beings? This I never. The others, yes, all the others is gobbling them up every night, but not me. I is a freaky giant. I is a nice, jumbly giant. I is the only nice, jumbly giant in giant country. I is the big, friendly giant. I is the BFG. What's your name? My name is Sophie, she said, hardly daring to believe the good news that she had just heard. That was the end of the chapter. Thanks for sharing it with Olive and I. Wake up, Olive. I think she fell asleep. There she is. All right, we'll talk to you later. Maybe another chapter later on. Bye-bye.